Planning Commission meeting to order. I am Chairperson Mayor Zach Bruink. We'll go around the table and introduce ourselves.
Adam Tagan, Community Development Director.
Sue Wesley, Commissioner.
Lee Tuck, Commissioner.
Joe Terry, Secretary.
Thad Kubaschak, Commissioner and City Council Representative.
Welcome. Thank you all for being here. We'll move into item number 1, which is the approval of the report from April 2nd, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. Commissioners, what are your wishes regarding that item?
Motion to approve.
A motion by Tal, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Wesley. Any discussion or corrections on the report? Hearing none, moving to a vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Item 2, maps and plats received. There are no maps or plats received beyond what we've done on our agenda here today. So we'll move on to item number 3, public hearing on the Plan 180235 Love Inc. The applicant is requesting a conditional use to allow for a charitable institution within the R2 one-family and two-family residential district. The subject property is located at 710 20th Avenue South. So with that, I will open the public hearing, and I will call 3 times, both in the affirmative and in the negative, for individuals wishing to speak on that request. For the first time, anyone wishing to speak in favor of the request? Rick?
Sure. So I'm Rick Merton. I'm president of Love Inc. of Southwood County, a new 501c3 organization. New Hope Community Christian Reformed Church had voted to disband, and as a legacy to the community, decided to gift their building and property to our organization. So with that, we are requesting a conditional use permit to utilize that facility in the manner of the Love Inc. nonprofit.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the request? And for the third and final time, anyone wishing to speak in favor of the request? We've got 2 chairs for you right here. Come on, come join us up over here.
Last one, you gotta sit by Zach.
You gotta- last one's gotta sit by the head of the table here. And I'll give you the bill, Joel. All right, so anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the request? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the request? And for the third and final time, anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the request? With that, I will close the public hearing. We'll move on to item number 4, which is action on Plan 180235 Love Inc. Conditional use to allow a charitable institution within the R2 district. Commissioners, what are your thoughts, concerns, comments on that item? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion as well. Adam, you want to speak to this?
Otherwise, just real quick, you received staff advisory report, so I did recommend approval of this. Basically, because it was a church, I couldn't find any record of that church ever having a conditional use, so it was likely established prior to the current zoning code that required a conditional use. That is why I advised Love Inc. that they do need to get a new conditional use in order to operate at that facility. So basically reviewed it, I didn't see any major issues with it, and I am recommending approval subject to 6 conditions, mainly tied towards things like making sure there's sufficient parking, that if they put up exterior lighting, that they're not shining into the windows of the neighbors, pretty standard conditions. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but otherwise we did recommend approval.
We were very disappointed that we wouldn't be able to hold those third shift training sessions, so
There was that, yes.
we had to swallow hard on that
9
condition.
p.m. and 7 a.m., right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't miss that shift work yet anyway. All right.
Was there any other correspondence, Adam?
There was
did
one,
I'm
yes.
sorry, I did include, there was one neighbor who objects to the transition, having concerns that going from a church, which generally operates Saturdays, Sundays, timeframe to a week-long operation. But again, planning staff felt that actually overall traffic will most likely go down. It'll be spread out throughout the week. At the most, you're probably looking at 10 people for trainings during the day and a couple of staff members. So by no means did it strike me as something that was going to have a negative impact on the area.
And Adam, just for clarification's sake, for others in the room or others watching on TV, if someone's offered a conditional use permit and there is activity that goes above and beyond that, can that conditional use permit be revoked?
In our current ordinance, there is not a formal procedure, but there is state law that basically says if you're in violation, that there is a process to go through. Our new code clarifies it a little bit better, but basically, yes, there would be a hearing before the Plan Commission in which that conditional use could be revoked.
All right. Commissioners, what are your wishes regarding that item? Or just item?
I'll make a motion to approve action plan 18-0235, Love Inc. Conditional use to allow a charitable institution within the R2 district subject to the conditions proposed by staff.
A motion by Terry, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Wesley. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, moving to a vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. All right. Thank you, Rick. Good luck to you. And
All right. I'll
we've got-
vacate a seat here.
We'll move on to the council then, or at our next meeting. Item 5, public hearing on Plan 180241, Wood County. The applicant is requesting a rezoning from the A1 agricultural district to the R3 multifamily residential district. The subject property is located at the southeast corner of 17th Avenue North and Rosecrans Street. With that, I'll open the public hearing. I see Jason's here from Wood County. Jason, do you want to speak in favor of the request?
Yeah, the property that,
Could you get up so we can
Sure,
hear
sure,
over here?
sure.
Please.
Yeah, the property that's under consideration for rezoning today is 7.71 acres. The county has held that for, just gonna sign this here real quick. The county's held that property since 2002, and we bought that property from Consolidated Papers at the time for I think about $125,000. And the reason that property was purchased, the county had plans, had possibly build a justice center there at some point in time, and nothing ever really came about with that. The county's decided to go a different direction as far as their the property they have. They recently purchased river block and some things like that, so they felt that it would be best to, turn that property over to for sale and have some investment in that property and help the tax base out. A few months back, we received an offer from a developer who was proposing market rate housing, 48 units for the 7.71 acre piece. Right now, the property is zoned A1 or A, and we're looking at rezone to R3, which is a higher density residential. In talking to a few people, I know there was some concern about the type of housing there. The type of housing that we've been talking about with the developer is a market rate housing, no subsidies with it, not really considered a low income housing by any means. And the thought is that we price that whatever the market can bear in this area here. As far as the residential use, we kind of think it fits well with the neighborhood there, with the properties to the south. But apparently, we have some concerns here. We'll hear shortly, I'm sure. But so the county would support having that property rezoned to R3 from A1.
All right, thanks, Jason. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the request? Yes, sir.
I'll go up here too for you. My name is Chris Slater. I'm with Prefect 3. I'm the developer. I've not had an opportunity to meet you. We get screened through a broker, but we are the developer looking at building the 48-unit apartment complex on the site. We're obviously in favor of the change in zoning. A little bit of a background about us. We've been in business for around 40 years. We're based out of Brookfield. We've done similar developments to this up in Cronenweder, up in Mosinee, Wausau, Rhinelander. This is, as it was alluded to, a market rate development, so there's no subsidies, it's not an affordable or a governmental program like that. It's all market rate. The rent range that we'd be taking would be around between $900 and $1,000. So nice levels of rentals. The buildings themselves are 12 families. They've got attached garages. They're around 1,100 square feet. We've again built 4 of them. We'd have to comply with the landscaping plans and with the requirements and code within Wisconsin Rapids to make sure that we had enough greenery and enough trees. You all being local residents and on that street know that that thing is dense. There are a lot of trees on it right now, so we'd have to do and cut some of those, but we'd like to keep as many as possible because that does reflect well and it does help our rentals. From an operational standpoint, the management company, we operate around 13,000 apartments in 14 states. We have 500 people that are employed daily to take care of our residents' needs. Those people and employees of our firm would be the caretaker, the person that's there daily leasing the apartments, and also a maintenance tech to operate and to fix any sort of concerns with sinks or the grounds and make sure that everything was taken care of. We do operate apartments here in the city of Wisconsin Rapids now. Country Pines over on 28th Street North. We operate that to 24 family. We've run that for 10 plus years. And then we also Sunset Apartments, which is over near the mall. It's a 40-unit apartment complex, and we own and operate that. And so anybody that's been by the mall and has seen that property, we invested several $100,000 into the apartments themselves, building garages, improving the appearance and overall look of those apartments over the course of the last 7 years. So we have a big sense and a big pride of ownership. It means a lot to us to build a nice product and to collaborate with a municipality like Wisconsin Rapids and the county that offered up the piece of land. So we're excited about it. We've been successful in other similar communities and we know that we can here. Obviously, it's sensitive, being neighbors to you guys and all that, and I understand that and empathize with it, but we're looking to be good neighbors and a part of the community and a big investment for Wisconsin Rapids. So with that, I'll turn it over, but thank you guys.
Thank you. And anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the request? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the request? Okay, we will go into those wishing to speak in opposition to the request. Who'd like to speak first? Anybody wishing to speak in opposition? Joe?
I will. Joe Zerflu, District 1 Alderperson. I got a lot of calls and emails from various residents that are just concerned about the rezoning. They don't, kind of came out of nowhere. There wasn't a lot of buildup. I did explain to them that that is not an unusual course of business though when a developer comes to Wood County or any owner of property and wants to develop something. The main concern is, if I'm getting this right, and some of you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, because I see some of you here, it's agricultural right now, and if it goes to R3, there's traffic concerns for Rosecrans. Also, the properties to the south, which are R2 right now, Adam, so those are mostly all just single-family
You're talking
residences.
across the former railroad tracks?
South of Green Bay, basically.
Yes, those would be R2.
So there's just a lot of concern that this rezoning doesn't really fit with that area, and of course there were some concerns too about having so many multiple units just kind of pop up on a street that's rather rural. So that's just kind of a summary of what people have contacted me about. So if, I guess someone else has any additional concerns.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Yes.
Hi, my name is Laura Bartuszewski, and I live on the corner of Rosecrans and 11th Street North. My husband moved to that home before we got married. The reason he moved there is because it felt like he was a little bit out in the country to him, even though he was officially in the city. It's one of the things he very much enjoys. We really enjoy the wildlife there, the quiet, the lack of traffic, and the fact that we can take my daughter who is disabled, who is often in a wheelchair, other times has to walk very slowly. We can take her up and down Rosecrans and look at the trees with her and the birds, and it's been very peaceful and a very nice place for us to live as far as lack of traffic and the wilderness.
Laura, can I get you to spell your last name, please?
EARDACHIWSKI.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to the request?
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah, sure.
First of all, are you planning on putting sidewalk around this? There's no sidewalk
We
shown
have
on the
a
map.
site plan.
And would you be, on the site plan, would you be doing sidewalks on both sides, going down Rosencrantz and also down 7th? That's,
And if I can clarify a couple of things, and again, Adam Tagan, Community Development Director. The request before, and this may seem like splitting hairs, but I just want to make sure it's absolutely clear. The request before the commission today is whether or not to rezone the property from A1 to R3.
Okay.
I provided the site plan when the letters went out in the notification, just to give people a sense of what the development could look like.
Okay.
But that's not what's formally being reviewed tonight.
Okay.
It would have to come back through for a site plan approval in which landscaping, parking, lighting, site improvements would all be reviewed. That being said, within our ordinance, multifamily, commercial, and industrial, when they develop, are required to put in sidewalks.
okay. So my next question, I have drainage questions, a couple other ones, that'd be at the next meeting. What if-
Only because they haven't developed that, because they're not gonna put the cost of developing stormwater, drainage, all that until they know whether or not the zoning would be in place.
Okay.
General questions, we may be able to answer, but if it depends kind of on the level of your question, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to the request? Yes, sir.
Wayne Durant. Anyways, I lived there under Rosecrans last night, seen you go by with your daughter and that, it was nice. I also got a sight impaired grandson, and I don't like auto traffic. We're gonna get tons of traffic. You're talking 48 families. I mean, you're talking a lot of people. And they're not gonna go out 17th Avenue, they're gonna come down Rosecrans. There's gonna be, no one's gonna walk there. No one's, that's a big concern. My big concern is also the people living there. The people, you put 48 families together, there's a couple bad apples. The police reports, actually, I went and got police reports from other apartment buildings, and, I mean, there's a concern about having more trouble in the neighborhood. And I think we have enough trouble on the west side to begin with. I don't think we need any more over there by adding 48 families, And that's my biggest concern, is traffic and having troubles with families. Yeah, and I ain't real thrilled about what's going up there, but, they own the land, they can do whatever they want, but that's my concern, is policing it and taking care of our traffic. I mean, that's two of our biggest concerns.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Yes.
Priscilla Kite. I live at 1330 Rosecrans Street. I've lived there for 36 years, almost 37. And like you, part of the reason that we purchased that property was because it felt like country and because it was zoned agricultural. And we enjoy the wildlife.
Because we saw a deer just before we came over to the meeting, walking through that.
We enjoy that. And I know that right now in our time of history, our time of the city with the beautification of the river projects that you're so involved in and things, we have so appreciated that we have this big green space. And I'm very respectful of that and would like to see more green space. As an aside to that, I'm very distressed when I drive through our area and see all of the trees being cut down with the utility work. And then you go to Door County or the North Shore and you see every effort taken to preserve the trees, to preserve the beauty of the city. And I know that a good use of our tax dollars is to make our beautiful spaces even more beautiful. And here we have this space that's already there. It would be very cool, in fact, if it could become something like the Schmeekly
Reserve.
in Stevens Point. It's not as big of a space as that, but here we have it. It just could use a little tiny bit of developing, and then that would just provide a whole really exciting kind of green space use in our city. And as you drive through Wisconsin Rapids, there really aren't that many parks and there aren't that many green spaces. A lot of people that don't live in our specific area, let's say to the south of the railroad tracks, this is a walking path that doesn't cost anything outside of the plowing of the streets, which this year you had to do very late. But it's a walking path for a lot of people, dogs, families. You see whole families walking our area, and it is a very safe, beautiful, beautiful area. So that's, I don't want to be selfish. Of course, I love the woods, and I would like to see it there, but if it can only stay there by being developed with little trails or things like that, I would just love to see that be a green space.
Thank you. Others wishing to speak in opposition to the request? Yes.
My name is Mildred Huffman, and I have a vacant lot over on Rosecrans. And I'm kind of concerned, what kind of multi-family are we zeroing in on? Is there a certain type that's going to be addressed here?
And I think that was addressed, I think, when he said the rents were the 900 to 1,000 a month, and it was family. I mean, that was kind of the market, so it was not, there's no affordable component to this.
There's no tax
There's no
credits.
tax credits or any of that, right?
I've heard it's supposed to be low income, is that true?
That's incorrect,
That's incorrect?
right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And why do we need 48 units? I mean, this is all agricultural, like you hear from the neighbors. And all of a sudden, we're gonna have 48 units? That's
That's
like
the
having a
proposal,
bigger
yeah.
city.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of concerned about that and the traffic.
Sure. Thank you. Others wishing, Helen?
Helen Streekstra with the Rental Association here in town, and I'm wondering, have you done a market study?
I don't
As
have-
far as need, you don't need to do that.
We're willing to take the investment risk
Sure.
to do that,
Okay.
so we haven't done a specific
We
one.
thank you that you're not doing the tax credits, we thank you for that, but I do question the need, especially in the ability in the 900 to 1,000 to 1,100 square feet. Job supporting in this area, it's gonna be a struggle. Retirees, it may be a struggle, I couldn't tell you that, but I would be very concerned. You go into all the complexes around and you can talk to the major players in the business, and they have got vacancies. And they have got vacancies every first of the month. And these are not necessarily in the 9 to 1,000. But I tell you, I'm really questioning the need. We're talking something in the Centralia Center, we're talking the North Point Development. We have S.C. Swiderski, who is always looking. And I thank you for your interest, and this should be very interesting to watch.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to the request? Yes.
Kimberly Simic. We live on the corner of 17th Avenue North and Green Bay. And we also moved into the area, purchased a bigger lot size, and then ended up getting the lot next to us. It's the comforts of being out towards the country, not a whole lot of traffic, yet we have the city water and sewer, which is really nice to have. We don't have to pay for all that extra stuff. It's just nice, it's convenient being in that side of the town, and I want to see it stay agricultural. I'd like to see, if anything, a family go in and build a home there and farm on it if they'd like to. There's not many options in the city to do that, I mean, to buy a bigger parcel of land. So I'd like to see it stay agricultural.
Thank you. Joe, did you have your hand up?
Yeah. Joe Wiggins. I own several acres of real estate in that vicinity. My investment was about $35,000 8 or 9 years ago when they resurfaced the street, new curb and gutter. Okay, so I'm not in favor of it for that reason. I may do something there in the future with my acreage, not sure. The other thing is, what percentage of that real estate is wetland, any of it, or no?
Yeah, you can address those.
There was a wetland delineation done on the property.
Okay.
And basically, that is identified on that concept plan that
Okay,
was
okay.
sent around, that is accurate based on, I think wetland delineation was done last fall.
Meaning,
Meaning they had a new study done to determine where the wetlands existed on the
right,
site.
but did they say how much of that real estate was considered wetland? I mean, would it be 20% or 10%? Or?
I mean, obviously not everyone can see this, but this is what was sent out, so the green.
Okay,
is
that
what
area.
was-
All right.
On this particular,
Okay.
to the other property.
And, on that behalf, I mean, that ground there is not a favorable building site. Wood County Highway Department just buried 1,000 feet of drain tile in their front yard so they can mow the lawn. It's really not favorable ground. It's not, I'm not saying it's not doable, but I'm sure they're gonna have an analysis done on that, but they may find that that's not real favorable there. The other thing is, I would much rather see the city of Wisconsin Rapids take a blighted area somewhere or something that's not in operation. You take that real estate, you put this on there. There's a real estate just right down the road, Spruce Park Motel, it's 7 acres. It's in the city of Wisconsin Rapids, city sewer and water, price is favorable. Gail's not asking a lot of money for it. It was a motel for 40 years. Her mother and dad ran it for 25, she ran it for 14. She wants to get out. Nice piece of real estate, ideal. It's 7 acres. I thought somebody mentioned here this was 7 acres. you're picking up a piece of property that's not in operation, may never be in operation again. And, I'd rather see the city find real estate like that than take a nice natural area that maybe could be utilized in a better fashion.
Thank you.
Pretty important to maybe look at that as a overall assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. Others wishing to speak, sir?
I'm James Risbroker. I own the property immediately next door to the east of this proposed change, 1421 Rosecrans. We have 7.5 acres there. Again, we're there because you got the country feel. But 48 acres, 48 neighbors next to you, that's gone. My boy goes out there and rides his go-kart, rides his snowmobiles. But 48 neighbors there, now all of a sudden, how many complaints are we gonna get? Because us in our agricultural area now can't use that as an agricultural area because it's bothering the neighbors. He wants to start raising chickens, which I haven't let him yet, but we're working at doing that to getting him responsible enough that I'm not doing it. Again, we start doing something like that, 48 neighbors gonna want somebody next door raising chickens. Things like that. It's changing that's gonna majorly change our property. And we're not looking to change our property. We're there because we like what it is.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to the request? Lee?
Lee Graff, District 2 Alderman. I have a question for the developer. Do you guys strictly deal in the the high-density units, or do you guys do subdivision type work where there would be single-family homes built with a nice trail or something to accommodate less of the parking issue? And do you guys do complexes like that? to make it a nice.
We're a multifamily developer. That's our niche. The green space on this is relatively large. It meets the ordinances, it meets the code of Wisconsin Rapids, so we comply with the local standards and municipal regulations in order to make sure that we work well with whatever municipality we're at. So this is a multifamily development, and that's what we do.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition?
I was just going to mention, I live on the corner of Rosecrans and 11th Avenue. And
could you address your name, please?
Sorry, your name, please? Igor Bartachewski.
Okay.
And similarly, like some people mentioned, I used to live out in the country, south of Nakusa, and when I ended up moving to Rapids, just that area of town seemed very welcoming, just because it wasn't something as alien as I came in living here. And I do love that feel that's out there where it seemed a little country, but we're still in town with some of the services that we have there. The one thing I was going to mention, mention it to Joe, like I work at Stevens Point now, and if there is something, I know it's maybe still owned by the county, if this piece of property or most of that area could ever be developed to something, I think of like Schmeekley Reserve. If you want to do something for the city that had maybe just something like either some bike trails or some walking trails, I think that's a neat area that could be used in that sort of manner, besides just developing into just another asphalt property kind of situation, that it could give a benefit to the city as well, not just something that's just, run-of-the-mill kind of a property kind of situation. So, living around there, that I think that'd be a neat feature to be added to maybe the bike trails or just walking paths or something that gives you a better sense of nature than just a regular park, or green space that way. So,
thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Yes.
And one of the concerns would be the property values, is how that would be affecting that.
Your name, sir?
Up or down. Charles Kite.
Thank you.
1330 Rosecrans over there. So that would be a concern to see if the property values take a dip because of that. That I don't know.
Thank you. Yes?
If I could just say one more thing, I really do like what my husband just spoke about Schmeekley Reserve, and so did you earlier, and that if some people are saying a walking path wouldn't be doable, given the fact that it's wetland, it very much is. If you do look at Schmeekley Reserve, they have many raised paths that they made with decking, so I just wanted to, we could keep it very natural and the community could enjoy it.
Thank you.
Just wanted to note as part of the record that we did receive multiple objections to this request, so I did hand out to all commission members a map where I tried to highlight where those individuals are. There were a couple where I couldn't identify necessarily where they actually lived, so either they were rental or they lived, or it was just under a different name than what our property records show. And then I provided the actual legal objections as well, so I just wanted to make that part of the record.
Thank you.
Just to mention with the comment that's come up, comparing like to Schmeekley Reserve and doing something like that, there's more than that 7 acres that's looking to be rezoned, that's owned by the county right there. Our property is actually wrapped by county land behind us, both sides of us. And then there's the old railroad bed also beyond the county to the south of us. So there is a sizable chunk of property to do something that's in green space.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else wishing to? One question?
Was this real estate advertised by the county?
It was not actively.
You know, because now I'm thinking, you know, this is an opportunity here for the city of Wisconsin Rapids. And if you didn't advertise real estate to anybody, I mean, you may have all kinds of interest in there, maybe a better fit than what the majority of the people here are not real happy with this type of development. My other question was, how many people are on this committee? I'm not that familiar with the committee.
The 6 of us.
Six people.
One not here.
6 people on the committee. Did, how many of you visited the site or?
I live down the road.
Yeah. And, well, right, you live down the road. So everybody is aware of the physical site? Okay, just making sure.
Personally, anyway, yeah.
Okay.
And this, as Adam had indicated earlier, this is a rezoning question, so I could have called you out of order for that question because it's irrelevant to the piece, but it's a very nice guy. All right, we will go ahead and close the public hearing. Commissioners, move on to item number 6, action on Plan 180241 Wood County, rezoning from A1 district to the R3 district. Open it up for discussion. Comment.
Well, I guess I can just make a comment. I appreciate everybody coming down here. This is how democracy works. Granted, with the city, it's representative democracy, but as far as a public hearing goes, this is when the public is designed to be able to speak to, whether it's the commission or the city council. And yeah, I really appreciate it. This makes a commissioner's decision pretty easy, so thank you all.
I'm not sure what's easy about the decision. There was not one at the city council meeting, even though the request or the report will go to the city council for their final determination on the project as well. So just wanted to, from a process standpoint, share that with everyone. And there are a number of city council members in the room, so thank you for coming down to hear the public hearing discussion. Commissioners, other comments, thoughts, or action? Joe?
So while it's not specific to the, the site plans, one of the concerns that I've heard from our industries in the city is a lack of housing opportunities and the challenges that they have to recruit because of the lack of housing opportunities. I do think that we need to carefully consider what parts of the city are not built, what makes economic sense in a municipality as far as tax base and the ability to enjoy an economy of scale, so that if you have, for example, one or two property owners on Rosecrans, obviously, when it was resurfaced, there are some pretty big assessments to pay for those areas. Because of the way the city designs and builds its infrastructure, as compared to a more rural area where there's not as much investment in the infrastructure. So the economy of scale is important, and the ability for a municipality to maintain and replace those pieces of infrastructure depends on a reasonable density of residential development coupled with commercial and industrial business. So, I will say that as far as the zoning goes, looking at the area and, the type of use, it is a residential use. It is significantly different as far as density goes, an R3 zone, than some of the surrounding areas that are still zoned ag. But one of the questions I have, I guess, is, and I know that it's in our report, but Adam, can you clarify a little bit as far as our comprehensive plan and some of the other potential uses for a piece of property like this, should someone be motivated to sell it?
Yeah, I can answer what our current comprehensive plan shows. Our current comprehensive plan shows planned mixed use for the area. For those of you who haven't read the comprehensive plan, because it's such an exciting document. Planned mixed use, under the category, there are some areas that are shown. This area is shown for that. Another area is along State Highway 54, kind of by Woodlands Business Park. The intention is for a variety of uses, anywhere from residential to commercial, but it's supposed to be developed in a campus-like setting, is how it's phrased in the comprehensive plan, meaning it shouldn't be small individual lots developing over time. It should be developed in larger tracts so that it can be dealt with more appropriately. Residential is specifically referenced, as well as commercial, and I think office is the other land use specifically referenced. So those are kind of the categories. That's why, at least when looking at just a comprehensive plan, an R3 zone would be consistent with that.
Thank you. I guess the other comment that I have is, looking at the size of the parcel and, this schematic sketch, if this were to be approved, I think at such time that any plan comes before the commission for development of said lot, that considerations for potential traffic on Rosecrans could be addressed, whether it's through access, or is the use permitted by right, and that as long as whatever they are intending to do follows the ordinance, they can do it, or are there some conditions that can be applied, such as screening, some access limitations, light pollution type limitations? Can you help explain that?
And I'll have a two-part answer, only because we're kind of in an unusual spot right now. Right now, we have an existing zoning code, and we're in the midst of rewriting our code, as this commission knows very well, because you've sat through approximately 20 meetings on it already. So under the current code, we have an R3 district. It lists permitted uses. Multifamily is one of those. However, that multifamily use is subject to site plan approval by this commission. Site plan approval generally is going to be tied to things such as what's the overall density, what's the site layout, what's the landscaping, lighting, parking, all those type of things. Access could potentially be part of that discussion. If it can be tied to that it is better for the site layout and it's tied to public health, safety, welfare, I think that's a logical discussion to be had at that time. And so the commission could approve a development, again, at that site plan level, subject to certain conditions. One of those could be, if I'm understanding what you're getting at, that no access to Rosecrans, that access would only occur off of 17th Avenue. Again, assuming that it can still be developed appropriately with that consideration. Under the proposed zoning code, we have a lot more, I guess, language in the code that we specifically deal with what the lighting levels can be. We specifically deal with what the landscaping has to be at a minimum. We deal with access a lot more clearly. So it becomes, the site plan review is more of just making sure that it complies with the code. But again, there's still some wiggle room there based on the commission's review of it to make sure that it's still the most appropriate for that location. So that's a probably longer answer than you wanted.
No, that's what I wanted to clarify, and you know, we've got an audience to hear this as well, so thanks.
Commissioners, any other comments, questions? All right, entertain a motion as well.
So do we have to motion to accept it in order to deny it?
Correct. Okay. Yeah, affirmative motion, and then, yeah, right. I'd make a motion to approve the request. Is there a second?
We'll second that.
Second by Tao. Move into further discussion.
Now, all those, the other parcels that are around that are single family, right? Or are they all A1?
The other property is owned by the county at this time, and yeah, basically, if you look at one of the maps, should have been attached to your report. I'm a little colorblind, so it's a little hard for me, but yes, basically to the north, east, and south are all currently zoned A1.
Okay.
Agricultural, so the same as the current zoning of the parcel. You don't get into residential until you cross the former railroad tracks in Green Bay. So.
Okay. Question for Jason. When the county board took action on this item, was the county, what was the vote?
I'm pretty sure, let's see if I can find the resolution here. I'm pretty sure it was unanimous approving it. Yes.
All 19.
And that was approved on March 20th of 2018.
Thank you. And what was the level of investment that you're planning on the project? Construction estimate?
Value?
Yeah.
To be determined by a bunch of factors, so millions?
Yeah, right.
It'll be millions.
Right, okay. I wasn't sure if you had kind of a range of that. Okay.
Over 3.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you.
So it's $70,000 in taxes.
Right. Thank you.
Mr.
Yes.
I guess as far as looking at the zoning map and the current developments that are going on right now, this looks like it'd kind of be a spot zoning type of an issue, and I guess I don't really agree with that, because looking at the development that's going on across from Lincoln High School adjacent to YMCA, and there's a number of multifamily zoning buildings there. Also, we were talking about, back in January, we approved, kind of going along with potential for a developer to make an application for credits, and that would be in the south parking lot of the Centralia Center. And looking at that, the zoning map does have several multifamily zoned areas there, but how dense this area is with residential on the south side of the tracks and all agricultural zoned on the north side of the tracks, I'm struggling to find anywhere where there's multifamily zoned near this proposed rezoning request. So I would actually be concerned that we would be in violation of specifically spot zoning this for this purpose.
Do you have any comment of that sort?
I guess my only comment to that is because of your comprehensive plan showing this area for development, it has to start somewhere. So there's always going to be, I guess you could consider it spot zoning, but the first horse out of the gate is going to be the first zoning in that area.
True,
So
but on the
is
other
it-
hand, across the street, it's all industrial. So then the question is, 10 years down the road, we have this development here. Who's going to want to be living in that development when everything else is now industrial on that side of the road? So
I don't disagree with that, but again, as far as the spot zoning, I would just, on a personal level, disagree just because, again, you have to start somewhere.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I have similar thoughts to Joe in the sense of, you know, as I'm listening to all the comments and certainly appreciative again for your time and consideration of concerns with the proposed development or the rezoning, really, that's what's in front of us today. But in terms of just need and our own housing analysis that the city conducted 2 years ago, what still shows a very small amount of high-quality multifamily properties in the city, right? A lot of C and D quality. You think about Gaynor and whether it be 17th Avenue down there and some of the other places. So I think from a market standpoint, I'm not as concerned about the markets absorbing this, because I think when we see what's happened in Plover and where people are living, they aren't living in Wisconsin Rapids, and it's largely driven based on the fact there isn't available units and there isn't the quality of units. So from an economic development standpoint, I'm motivated, obviously, to get this project sited in the city, and because our business leaders tell us they can't get people to move to the city, they are living in other communities. So I struggle with that, but I also struggle with the fact that if the county were to develop this as a justice center at one point, all of these same issues would have been there, and I think the traffic and other issues would have been worse, frankly. So not that, I always like to try to take a less ideal situation and make it better, and I'm thinking to the lines of, the site plan and fixing some of those things. So I guess those are my comments and my thoughts, and obviously the city council is going to get a crack at this here in 2 weeks. So those are my comments. I guess we've got a motion, a second. Any further discussion, commissioners? Moving to a vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. I'll do a roll call just so we can get the.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Aye. And nay. Motion fails, so the city council will get a non-favorable or a negative motion, or they'll be able to take it up, right?
Right, so if the council approves the plan commission's recommendation, the rezoning would fail unless they pull it out of the report and act on it separately.
Okay, very good, just from a process standpoint. So that'll be the
next Tuesday, I believe.
Next Tuesday, at 6 p.m. here at council chambers. But the public hearing obviously was held today, so there wouldn't be any public hearing at that next meeting, but certainly you can tune in or come down to hear the council's decision at that point. So, next Tuesday, 15th. All right, thank you very much. Thank you all for the discussion. We're going to continue on. We've got a couple other items on our agenda. So number 7 is Plan 180287, Altman Construction. The applicant is requesting site plan approval to allow a 10,000 square foot addition onto the existing warehouse. The subject property is located at 2621 Jefferson Street. Council members, actually Adam, you've got a staff report on this item as well. Did you want to talk through any of that?
I guess similar to the R3 district we were just discussing, this property is zoned M3, and under the code, there's not specific listed uses in the M3 district. It just says that all improvements require site plan approval. So the request before you is to expand an existing warehouse. It's about a 60,000 square foot facility, and they're looking at a 10,000 square foot home to the north, closer to Jefferson Street. The last expansion was done in 2017, which was about 20,000 square feet. So it's not a matter of use, it's just is there any concerns with the site plan? It is an existing all-metal building. Traditionally, I'm not a big fan of all-metal buildings, but that's how the West Side Industrial Park has developed over time. So this proposed expansion would be consistent with the existing building. So I guess, again, if it was new construction in a new area of town, I would push for a higher quality exterior. But in this case, I think it fits the character. However, I do think that as this property develops, that landscaping should be added to, again, minimize the look of that metal building by adding some shrubs, trees, basically along the foundation plantings on that north side. I did meet with the builder out at the site earlier today to kind of give a sense of what that would look like under our proposed zoning code. So what I would be pushing for is basically two things. One would be street trees, and actually in this particular location there are mature pines and other trees there, so it actually already exceeds our requirement for frontage landscaping. And then the other thing I'd be putting for would be building foundation plantings. So again, there we're talking about shrubs and low trees to try and break that up.
Can you keep the, Charlie, we gotta keep it open in an open meeting, thank you.
So based on all of that, planning staff did recommend approval subject to 3 conditions. Again, that it be consistent with the existing building, that landscaping be provided, and that if there are any applicable codes and ordinances such as stormwater or parking, that it be complied with.
Commissioners, what are your thoughts on this? I entertain a motion. I'll move approval.
What is the, I guess, just to ask a question, what is the purpose of the addition for extra office space, for extra warehouse?
I'm going to talk to that, speak, you want to speak to the?
Sure. Hey, I'm Tom Altman with Altman Construction, and we put the addition on last year. It was more for, that addition was more for storage, and this year the addition is a tenant that's coming in there for light manufacturing, and so if you looked at the addition we did last year, you couldn't even tell it's an addition, and we matched the materials very precisely, so it looks very nice. And at the Commissioner Adams' request last year, they requested asphalt in the parking lot. We upgraded the parking lot, put asphalt in there. He requested we asphalt the driveway approaches. We asphalted the driveway approaches, and so this year, with the addition going to the north for the street, he's requesting some trees. I did talk over with the owner, and he would comply with the request, and so I guess that's...
Well, I guess, yeah, I've got no problem with metal buildings, obviously, if we're in a different area. I'm a journeyman iron worker, so I understand metal buildings.
Sure.
And I understand how you can match them perfectly
Sure.
after 10 years. So that, the metal building aspect isn't the concern, but it's, you know, is there a need for it? And yeah, and long story short, there is a need for the client.
Yes.
So, thank you.
Any further questions,
No,
Mayor?
not for me. Anybody else have any questions or comments? I move approval of the request subject to the staff conditions, 1 to 3. Is there a second? Second. Second by Tao. Move into further discussion. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, moving to a vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Move on to item number 8, referral from City Council regarding the sale of produce within residential districts. Adam?
If you were not following along at council over the last 4 months, give or take, there's been a discussion, this commission had reviewed a proposal to potentially allow sale of agricultural produce in residential districts. Ultimately, that appeared before the commission in 2 different forms. Both times that went forward with a negative recommendation out of the commission. Ultimately, that amendment was vetoed by the mayor after it was approved by the council. The council failed to overturn that veto, but immediately after that happened, there was a referral made that it could come back to this commission for, I guess, additional review and consideration, perhaps of looking at a new amendment. So based on the time and effort that had been put in, I felt it was appropriate just to basically put it on as a discussion item at the commission level, get some direction out of it, and then if there is a leaning one way or the other, either you're willing to take another stab of it or whatever that decision may be, then I would draft up any necessary language. I did also receive an email from the person who kind of started this discussion, who spent some time and they just kind of tweaked some of our language and came up with a recommendation. Again, this is not a formal, this is not my language, this is from Mr. Arnold, who had broached the subject, just to kind of get the creative juices flowing. So I guess that's where we stand, just looking for direction from the commission on where we want to go with it.
This is the same one we did last year, right?
Yeah, it was November, I believe.
The pumpkin sale one?
Hmm?
The pumpkin sale one?
Correct, yeah, the pumpkin sale. So ultimately, like I said, there was concerns, I believe, on allowing it in residential districts by the commission, what that impact would have. The version that went to council tried to tighten it up by having some restrictions, but ultimately the commission felt that wasn't sufficient and still not appropriate. But again, just kind of trying to get a sense of where we want to go before I spend 8 hours of my life trying to come up with the perfect language and then have a different opinion from the commission or the councilman.
So the way this is actually drafted, looks like it'd be a conditional use for
An R1.
For R1, yeah.
You mean the language from Mr. Arnold?
Yeah,
Yes.
compared to what it was before, because what we had before was just a blanket, you can, whatever the deal was, but now this puts it into a conditional use, therefore the petitioner would have to come before the plan commission and then pay the fee, and then potentially live up to the standard of what it is, and then have to, what is it? Is it a year that if they're not in compliance for a year, then it automatically drops, or would they have to come back every year type of a thing, or how does that work?
Traditionally, a conditional use, once it's approved, as long as they continue to operate it on an annual basis,
Okay.
it would remain in perpetuity unless they were in violation. And then at that time, like I said previously on a different case, if they're in violation of a conditional use under the new code, there would basically be a hearing before the Plan Commission to determine whether or not that conditional use should be rescinded or not.
Sure.
So have the rules changed for conditional uses, essentially that if it's listed as a conditional use, the city has to approve conditions for which it can occur on that property, correct?
Yeah, that was a discussion that this commission held with our zoning consultant 2 months ago, 3 months ago. But because of recent legislative changes, instead of, it took away some of the rights of a council to deny a conditional use unless there is a clear and very well-documented reason for it not to be approved.
Right.
So for example, and I'll just use tonight, a lot of neighbors showed up saying they were opposed to it. They had concerns, they had comments, but there was no factual information. If that had been a conditional use application and the council denied it based on the testimony that was presented, if someone were to sue the city, we would lose because there wasn't actionable items, there wasn't evidence or studies that supported a denial. A conditional use is moving along in that vein. So let's say the city comes up with a list of 5 conditions for someone, the applicant says yes. If the council were to deny that, that's where we might get into legal trouble. Not saying you can't deny it, but just it opens up that.
Now, that was one of the things, a couple different things that we were concerned about, the opposition to the previous ordinance was concerned about was selling Christmas trees and selling goats. Goats, did someone say goats? We could deny the conditional use permit for a request of selling agricultural crops if they specifically said that they wanted to sell goats, correct?
Right, because that would not comply with the land use category in the code.
Correct, so we would be fined, despite the fact that the state has taken away a lot of our discretion as a plan commission to approve or deny, or specifically to deny conditional use. As long as we tailor it specifically and get the wording right, having it a condition, and on top of it, having a conditional use permit process, I think would be better than that original ordinance that was defeated. Whether that was a good ordinance, whether it wasn't a good ordinance, in my opinion, the conditional use permit process adds one more, if not 2 more layers to someone being able to sell goats on the side of the road. So, yeah.
Well, I'm still not in favor of it, just because, like we talked last year, if we allow conditional use for this, what if somebody else says, can we do a conditional use for this? No, are we going to keep approving that? In R1 district, I think we should keep it as R1 district and not allow those conditional use, because there's other properties that, would be more suitable than our young home,
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, I mean, really, when you look at it, the strict purview of a residential unit, especially R1 residential, is the most strict zoning there is, period. So I mean, if that's the case, and again, it was a referral, but if that's the desire of the commission, yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with you.
I, for one, remain 100% opposed to it, in the same vein of the spot zoning concern about starting to change things. It's a slippery slope to make policy around a single request, right? This is a single request from a resident, well-intentioned, love the idea, it's great, teaching and everything else for their family, but we have ample opportunities for farm stands and farmers markets, and those things are all barrier-free. I mean, we have probably the most liberal farm stand ordinance, and essentially anywhere in a commercial district, and that's where those activities should be contained. And I completely am 110% opposed to any
So
change
if you
of
would
this sort.
accept this, and there's no reason that the next meeting you'd have 10 people that want to do it in their home, is that correct?
Right.
So,
Joe?
I guess the thing that keeps coming back to me is that the reason why we're here in the first place is because the city received complaints about someone selling farm stand produce from a residential lot. The whole thing came as a result of a complaint. And so the suggestion that it's not a big deal, it just doesn't bear weight to me, because it was a big deal and people were concerned about it. I do also, if this were to move forward, you know, in the previous version, and maybe it's clarified in the definitions, but it mentions in this one too, crops sold shall not have been grown at a facility intended for commercial distribution and/or sale of crops. So basically, anything comes off a farm or a garden, if you intend to sell it, you can't sell it, because as soon as you decide to sell it, it's commercial venture. You know, it's the entrepreneurship that we've heard about in some of our discussions, and in both versions, unless I'm mistaken about the definition of commercial distribution, if I'm going to sell it, it's commercial distribution, or am I mistaken?
Yeah, and I can try and clarify at least the intent of it, and again, it's tied to the particular individual who's doing it. There is an off-site facility where they grow pumpkins. There is a portion of that that is designed for commercial distribution. The strawberries and those type of things, that is intended to be sold either commercially or on that site. His little pumpkin patch, they don't distribute those pumpkins. The only way they sell those are his little farm stand on site. So it's not a commercial scale facility. So this was trying to get at the fact that if you have an off-site spot where you're growing it, but you're not a commercial farmer.
But if I have a quarter acre of pumpkins, and my market is my front yard,
right?
That's my, I've sized my crops for
disagree.
distribution, right? I mean, that's, so I'm challenged by that. I think that if it's going to be allowed, you know, I could see where it needs to be grown by the property owner, but I think it becomes convoluted if you start including any information about that. If it's intended for commercial distribution, it's not allowed, because that's exactly what someone's doing on their private property, is commercially distributing the product. I remain opposed to this.
Where was the location?
Baker and 14th.
Oh, yeah. No, like 13th maybe.
13th, yeah.
Yeah, we know exactly.
Yeah. And if the language were to move forward, and I know it doesn't help the individual who has raised it, but if you're really trying to allow just someone to have a garden in their backyard and sell things out front, then I think you take out that whole allowance of being able to grow it off-site. But again, that's only if this is moving forward, but that's going to unfortunately not help the person who has raised this subject, because it's not grown on-site. But that's, to me, more appropriate in residential district than having an off-site and bringing things in and selling it at your home. Then you're moving closer and closer to commercial.
Well, I think ultimately what we're trying to do here is we're trying to consider language that's good for the city, and we've got to segregate a request by one person as compared to what's good for, you know, the entire city. And unfortunately, that's the challenge that this commission and the council has, because the proponents for items typically show up in onesie-twosies, and the opponents show up in great numbers. So it is hard to gauge what's best for the entire community, you know, when dealing with these types of matters.
Well, specifically for me, I want to address the fact that I'm not for or against this particular issue or anything that gets brought forth to the commission. I do want to see, you know, discourse of it. Talk it out, hash it out. If this isn't conducive for the city of Wisconsin Rapids, then we make that decision, move forward. I think that one of the concerns, and whether it's a valid concern or not, I don't know, but one of the concerns that I got from the petitioner of this was that they felt that they didn't feel that there was enough vetting of this particular deal. So if we do take it back up, and again, like I said, I don't sell pumpkins, I don't grow, I don't have a garden at all. I sell tools when I pick them up on Craigslist. I utilize a multimedia tool that, you know, reaches out to a lot of people. I don't just, you know, put a tool or whatever out by my garage and say for sale. It just doesn't, it's about reaching people. But again, in the true essence of due process, that's what I had gathered from this person. Whether it's valid or not, I don't know. You know, I can't investigate that. But if we take this up, we vet it, and then we deny it as a body, that's where I'm fine with it. But what I don't want to do is try and shelf something, even because it's just one person. You know, the one person might have a great idea for something new that we've never even heard of before. You know, and if we don't want to listen, then that's what's going to keep the city of Wisconsin Rapids back. But yeah, as far as actual pumpkin sales, again, if it's a case where we vetted and it's deemed that any agricultural product is, you know, you have other places, whether it's the farmer's market, whether it's a commercial business on East Street, you know, and I think, Mary, you alluded to it, there's tons of stuff up and down on East Street. You know, that's the entrepreneurial aspect. If someone is really interested in selling something, they're going to find the best way of doing that. But again, it was initially the concern arose from an opinion of not complete vetting of the process there.
Joe? Adam, can you refresh my memory? Did we, as a commission, and I think that's what's challenging, we've got several older persons in here now, so it'd be a little bit different as far as moving forward because of this meeting in the presence, but did we meet for 3 different months or 4 months? Because we heard the request, you drafted language, we reviewed the language, it was sent back, you revised the language, we met again, and as a commission opposed it. I think it was after the 4th meeting and the second go-around of language.
Yeah, it was either 3 or 4 meetings. I believe there was just a general discussion. I went back and just basically drafted it as a very loose exemption into the code. There was no real restrictions. I basically treated it as a farmer going door to door, which we already have an existing exemption in. That was looked not favorably on it by the commission, so staff was directed to come back with something that had more teeth. So that was when it was redrafted, again, in conjunction, knowing there was an applicant trying to make it work for the person who was requesting it and still balance what the commission wanted. It came back, so that would have been the 3rd time. And then at that meeting, it was discussed, and the commission still was not comfortable with the language as proposed, voted it down, and then it transitioned, it moved on to the council. And the council discussed it 3 times? There was the initial discussion.
Well, the 3rd time was the last time, because it came back from the...
Because there's 2 readings, and then the veto, yeah. So first reading it failed, the second reading it passed, and then it was vetoed, and then there's a discussion on the overturning the veto.
Yeah.
So we have had 6 municipal meetings on the topic. But, like you said, perception is reality, right? And so, for people that were at the council meetings, that weren't necessarily, you know, experiencing the vetting process, perceptions could be completely different than others, right?
Well, that, and also, not that this is valid or whatever, but that brings forth even more of a perception from my strict purview on this, is that I didn't get any calls from residents about it. If it was that I'm not saying that it's controversial, not controversial, but I'm saying that if there is a controversial deal, I'm gonna get phone calls, I know, because I'm not brand new. So it's a case where we talked about it for, 6 months in all different ways, shape, or form, and nothing against staff or nothing against the mayor or the other elected officials, but I didn't have a single resident speak to me in opposition to it. So, I mean, again, that's my straight purview of that, so that, yeah, I mean, and not that we want to keep on taking it back to you guys, but, well, on the other hand, if it's a case where it needs to get put to bed, then it does, so.
Well, after 6 meetings, I would think it's time.
There's a lot of things we should be spending 6 meetings on that we don't, probably. Okay, I'm not hearing any real direction from an action standpoint, so I'm just going to move on to item number 9, which is a review of the final working draft of the zoning ordinance with consultant Civitech and setting of the public hearing date. Where do you go? You got a word. And I have to run over to that event, so I'm going to ask Thad if he would be so kind to... You can. Thad, would you be so kind to run the meeting? I have to go deliver remarks at a... Absolutely.
Do I get to sit in your chair?
Ken, it's all warmed up for you. All right, guys, thank you all for your time, and see you around.
Hey, how's everybody today?
Actually,
Got you all lathered up?
oh yeah, everyone's worked up.
Good.
So I think, just for your purposes, Charlie, this is Thad Kubishak. He's the new council representative. So at the last elections, our former alderman lost that running, so then the council reappoints a representative. So that's why Thad's here. And then we have one additional new alderman, Lee Graff, is in the back there. And then I think you've met Scott Kellogg, who is an existing alderman as well, just so you can.
Thad, you got that map?
Yes.
Good. Good.
And just for everybody in TV land, the mayor had another obligation. I'm the vice chair, so my name is Thad Kubishak. I'm going to be presiding over the rest of the meeting here. We don't have too much more meeting left, but someone's got to do it. So we'll be taking up item number 9, review of the final working draft of the zoning ordinance with the consultant, Civic Tech, and setting of the public hearing date.
Hi, my name is Charlie Handy. I'm a planner with Civitech Consulting. And I handed out a draft, April 1st draft of the zoning ordinance to you. I'm also going to hand out just a memo to kind of bring us up to speed on what recent. So, summary of the recent changes. At our meeting on February 19th, we added new zoning districts. There was quite a discussion, and the Plan Commission worked very hard to deal with a change that was kind of thrown at us, a curveball that was thrown at us from the state in regards to conditional use permits. And so it was decided that we would add these 5 districts. And so that has affected the zoning map. We brought a copy of that, and there should be a copy of that in your future land use map. Should be a copy of the zoning map in the front cover of your. And the other thing to note on that is where it says R8, that's the wrong color. It should be R8 brown. That's why R8 is shown there. Otherwise, the colors on that map are all accurate. We updated the land use matrix in light of the new changes at that meeting, and then we revised some of the review procedures by removing some of the appeal process decisions. So we'll kind of ask Adam to go through that process in the matrix over the next probably month, right?
As time allows.
As time allows, correct. So I wanted to go over a little bit of the open house, and any of you that were there, thank you very much for coming. We were very happy with the attendance numbers. It was very well attended. We had approximately 25 that signed in, which means we had quite a few more than 25 that were there that came and talked to us at the open house. I think the primary subject at the open house was the discussion of landscaping standards and things like that. There was landowners that thought maybe we were regulating landscaping around their homes, which is not the case. But there was some very good discussion. We did receive one written comment.
And that's what I just distributed.
Okay, all right. And his concern was on home occupations, and we have them not as a conditional use process, but as an authorized use under certain lowest standards. And his recommendation is that becomes a conditional use process. That was the only written comment that we received. We have not made that change. That's something that you can certainly discuss here tonight. But we think we're pretty close with a few minor changes. So it is really kind of on your plate to think about setting a public hearing, which would potentially give us a few more comments, and then we can make some minor tweaks again after the public hearing to present this for approval this summer. So, to entertain any questions from anybody present.
The changes to the land use matrix make sense to everyone, because of the concern with the conditional uses that we discussed on the previous item, there's the determination made that we needed more districts so that we can ideally control land uses more through the rezoning process, where the council still has more ability to say yes or no on factors versus a conditional use. And because originally how we had drafted the land use matrix was fewer districts, more reliance on conditional uses. But that kind of backfired once the state changed how it was looking at conditional uses. So that's why we added that neighborhood commercial district to kind of serve as a transition. I would put that in kind of areas like on Baker Street, where you have a higher traffic count, you've got some scattered commercial businesses on there, and maybe over time you'll see some additional ones pop up. Or Pepper Avenue, down by Ace Hardware, you've seen that kind of take place over time, where you had a bar, and then you added a senior or CBRF, and then we added a real estate office or insurance office. And so that B3 district, rather than rezoning it to a general commercial like 8th Street and opening it up wide the doors, the goal was that we have those kind of interim districts in there. So that's why we went back, or that's why the consultant did all the work, and I just take credit for it, of adding some of those transition districts like the B3, adding a specific district for mobile home parks, for example. Again, that same concern. If we allow mobile homes as a conditional use in our traditional multifamily district, and we kind of almost always have to approve a conditional use, that's opening the doors a little bit maybe wider than we wanted. So adding a specific district for that type of land use gives that control back to the commission and the council. So that's why there was a lot of changes between what was presented for discussion 2 months ago, I believe. And that's why it took a little bit longer. It seems like a minor tweak, but you kind of have to go through every single land use category and determine how best to retain control.
A lot of credit to this body for doing it that quickly. You retained the education that we gave you over the past couple of years pretty quickly, so. Yeah, the CBRF conversation too, we had a little bit of that at the last meeting, and talked a little bit about the fact that you have quite a few here in Rapids, and so we adjusted that ordinance to kind of fit that situation. So we did tweak the CBRF language also.
What's a CBR?
CBRF, you've got 2 next to you.
It's a community-based residential facility.
I just the term, okay.
Yep, and then.
Sorry, alphabet soup.
Yeah, it'll also apply to what is often referred to as an adult family home. Only difference is the scale. An adult family home usually will serve 3 to 4 individuals in a residential setting, and it can be anything from mental health to health issues to elderly care. A community-based residential facility is usually used for the larger facilities, anywhere from 5 to, a lot of time in a residential district, you'll see your cap around 8 units. So basically, what Charlie is getting at is there's state law, and it's very confusing, but what it seems to indicate is once you get to a certain percentage of units in a community, you can begin to say, we have met our obligations to that particular type of resident. So then you, again, have some more control at the city level, and that's what we were trying to do.
And that kind of falls under the Fair Housing Act of 1988, where technically we can't discriminate against anybody who seeks housing. But underneath state statute, it gives us a guise where if we reach that certain percentage, then we can start looking at other avenues with it. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Lee just mentioned too that there's a note for an R8 that is labeled as B1 on the far west part of the map. There's also one on the far south part of the map.
Okay.
I believe that's the part southern.
So I would ask everybody to do the same, right, R8.
There should be an R8.
R8.
Yeah.
be maples and
Crimson leaf.
Crimson leaf, right?
Thank you. And we'll make sure to make that change on our end.
And it actually probably is technically the one on West Grand right before the viaduct as well. I think that's that same
Sure.
pink color. There, and there would be another one is that smaller.
Got it. Thank you.
And did that get changed across from IGA on the east side where there was,
That one was always zone B2, and now that it's vacant, it didn't make sense to, I think we left it commercial on here. Yeah, it's shown as commercial on here.
So if there's no additional questions, I don't have your agenda in front of me, but do we have 2 public hearings to set? Or just one on tonight's agenda?
We had it geared towards the zoning ordinance public hearing date.
Okay.
The council, unless I'm mistaken, sets the public hearing for the comp plan.
Right, but the plan commission needs to approve the comp plan by resolution before they can.
Okay.
So you'll have to do that at some point as a plan commission.
I did not have that on the agenda.
And that's okay. I think we have time. So what we need to do is we need to schedule a public hearing, and statute requires that notice have a 30 days prior to the public hearing. So we can schedule it any time after 30 days of when the notice can go out. So that would be for you to take a look at your calendars. And are we going to do that with the council, or is that going to be just a plan commission public hearing for the ordinance itself?
I'm assuming what we would do is plan commission would host the public hearing, and then obviously we would invite the council in the hopes that the entire council would come, similar to what we did for the discussion that was held, was that late last year, where we held concurrent meetings of the council and the plan commission.
yeah, could we host a joint plan commission / council meeting? Is that not inappropriate?
Statutes doesn't specify.
Sure.
Personally, I think that's the most effective, because obviously the council at the end of the day is going to be making the decision, yay or nay, so the more involvement you get from them and that they're hearing the same comments and being part of that public hearing, I think is appropriate.
Would that be appropriate for you guys to do? Like something like 5:30 prior to the 6 o'clock council meeting, to just in case there was enough public that came down, half an hour?
Yeah.
Should we?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because zoning is so critically important that, I think that gives the public the best opportunity to, in conjunction with a council meeting to do that. So question though, would we have the commission resolution potentially then on Monday, June 4th? And then schedule a public hearing for Tuesday, June 19th? Or does the
how long do we have to wait
commission
on the
resolution
of the comp plan
need to be
It's-
approved first?
I guess I'd have to look at the specific verbiage, but I believe you can set a notice for a public hearing, and then the plan commission adopts the resolution in between. I will look tomorrow, first thing, and just make sure that it doesn't preclude you from doing that. And then I'll have our attorney look.
Okay.
Because I'm not
Right,
an
'cause
attorney.
that would be my question, is if we want to try to get this in front of the council in June, that we get the procedure correct.
And you said then the council would be Monday?
Tuesday,
I'm sorry.
June 19th.
Third Tuesday of the month. So you'd hold a joint meeting at 5 or 5:30? I mean, I guess it depends on how many people we think are going to show up for the public hearing.
And I'll let you make that discretion, or I guess a recommendation based on the phone calls and the inquiries and everything else that we've gotten. I haven't had any correspondence with this particular zoning rewrite, although it doesn't seem like there's much controversial items with it, because there's the unknown unknowns. We don't know what's going to happen until it becomes law. But based on phone calls that you, Joe, or any of the commission members or Adam have received on there, maybe get a guesstimate of how long the public hearing should be. I mean, if it's a case where everybody was positive at the open house and maybe we only need 15 minutes, but if there is some concerns, maybe we need an hour. I don't know, but that would be, best recommendation.
Could we schedule the council meeting for 6 PM or after the public hearing? Or does it need to be scheduled? It might be something we have to check with.
Well, that's a good question, yeah.
Because that would,
So that not
public hearing
everyone's
goes.
twiddling their thumbs.
Right.
For a half hour.
What
extension.
I've seen others do is if the public hearing goes long, they will not adjourn it, they will recess it.
And then
Have
complete it
a
after
hold
the
the
council.
council meeting, and then they will re-adjourn, or whatever you call it, after the council meeting's done and finish the public hearing.
I think the intent, though, would be that if the public hearing is positive, council may take action? Or does there have to be multiple?
There would most likely be still a month delay before council action.
Okay.
Because any
Understood.
public hearing comments, there may have to go back and make changes to the code. You don't want to
Understood.
assume that it's gonna, and
Right. Understood.
quite honestly, I wouldn't want to feel like we're forcing it down the councilman's
Yeah, it's
throats
a big
and
deal.
the public's throat for that matter. So you don't want it, otherwise it seems like it's just a rubber stamp type of public hearing.
But very nice to get the council's discussion after the public hearing, because that would really give us strong direction for making those final edits.
Correct. So even if the public hearing, the public part is only 15, 20 minutes, it may still be good to have an hour of time so that the council, since they're there ready, can have those policy discussions outside of the typical council meeting.
So maybe an agenda item for July 17th would be.
June.
No.
Oh, you're right, I'm sorry.
For a council review then.
Probably council review and approval.
Okay.
Ideally.
Would you have discussion at all, though, after the public meeting, at that council meeting? Would that have to be on the agenda as well?
Well, you would likely, if you're having a joint public hearing, the council could discuss and take action.
that time.
During that public hearing, or set that policy discussion. Because they would be.
That would be on the 19th.
That would be on.
Of June. Okay. Okay.
At least that's.
Yeah, that was at the public hearing. No, I'm sorry, not to interrupt. I believe the question she asked is that discussion happens at the joint meeting prior to the city council meeting. So I don't believe that your question, which is, would it have to be on the agenda for June?
Right.
No, because it should be handled in the meeting prior to the council meeting on the 19th. Just to answer your question.
Yeah, sorry, thank you, Lee.
Are you going to address this at all?
Yeah, that's a policy question on what the commission feels is appropriate for home occupations.
Sorry, I moved past it too quickly.
I'm certainly challenged because this is, this language that we have proposed is pretty typical, that there are certain things that are generally accepted as home occupations. And if it's through a conditional use permit process, it's going to be approved. And so if we have the conditions in the ordinance, it would save a hearing every time someone wants to do a home occupation. Because if they're in non-compliance, if there are parking issues or other things, it would already be in the ordinance as far as what reasonable conditions are for a home occupation, and it's, fairly strict already. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
Joe, as far as that's concerned, can you point us out where it would be what we would want to be looking at here?
You can continue to discuss, I'll try to find it for you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that was, for, if someone's gonna do tax preparation out of their home, for example. I just moved and now I'm gonna do tax preparation out of my home, so I'd have to come and go through a conditional use process in order to do that, and probably meet the same conditions as anyone else that would ever want to do that type of work would have to do. I think the impacts, the design of it is that the home occupation should be low impact, and that the standard should be literally standard, so that you wouldn't have to go through a conditional process each time. you know.
So what you're ultimately saying is that it's already there. We really don't need to, there isn't really a problem to correct, because the way that it's stated in the home occupation zoning is that it already vets that through the regulation of itself.
That's my thought, and it may be something that we want to just take another look at and make sure that it in fact does to our satisfaction, right?
That's page B38 in the binder that was handed out tonight. If that's what you're getting at.
Yeah.
So I think it's letters A through J is really what you're.
So in that, there are parking requirements, exterior character of the building, storage of materials. You know, all of this is to make sure it still looks like a residential land use. And then, I think the other concern was the number of employees.
Yeah, and if I remember Mr.
One.
Geniak's concern,
Right.
he thought 10 business trips or 10 customer trips was too many.
Right, he wants
per day.
5.
Yeah, and I can see at tax time, I mean, I use a person that works out of their home for, to prepare my income taxes. You know, I'm there for 20, 30 minutes, and there's someone behind me, and there was someone ahead of me. So, you know, during that short period of time, I would imagine that it's a reasonable business, it's professional, you know, it meets the standards, but there, you know, in that situation, there would be times for a few months where there could be quite a bit of traffic. That said, not a lot of cars in the driveway. You know, it'd be a vehicle. And I know the person that I use doesn't happen to be a resident of the city of Wisconsin Rapids, but they have one assistant that helps people get some things signed while they're working on some other things. And it's, you know, it's in a 3-bedroom house. I mean, it's a very conservative setup, and it seems quite appropriate as far as, you know, it's in a quiet residential neighborhood. You know, so I think, like I said, I think the limits here, the limitation on customer traffic already talks about not generating more than 10 customer trips per business day. But I think even some of those activities for short periods of time during the year may do more than that.
Are we, you know, obviously we want to be as aggregate as possible. For example, 25% of the total floor area of the dwelling unit. That makes a lot of sense, and it's something that isn't going to affect neighbors or traffic flow patterns or anything else. Whereas the 10 customer trips, is that something where we don't have a specific number, that we have limited customer activity? Is that, obviously it's less restrictive to have that, but is that something where now we're talking about that someone suggested we reduce it from 10 to 5? How, as a consultant, how have you dealt with that in the past?
Well, that number comes from some science. So planners have looked over the years at how many trips does a family take per day. And so they're saying 10 trips per day is something that you will commonly see from any family. So that's why we use that number, and that's why many codes use that number of 10 business trips per day as allowable.
Okay.
Anything over that is not authorized in this section. And so that's where the number comes from, is it's a fairly typical number for a home to make
Sure.
10 trips per day. So you go down to 5, it's fine, I have no problem with it, it's pretty restrictive.
And the question is, do we want to go down to 5? You know, that's a recommendation by a resident. But if that's a case where 10 is a scientific number, it isn't just a number that was picked out of the air or handpicked for the city of Wisconsin Rapids. If it's scientific, then that's, I think, what, at the end of the day, a magistrate or a court of law would see reasonable, so.
And the only thing I would add is if you take it out and do more vague language of just saying that you shall not overly increase traffic in the neighborhood, it makes it really hard on staff. How do I
determine?
I feel, but it's 4 cars and it's in my neighborhood, so I feel it's overly much, so that's why I like having a number. It may seem arbitrary, but at least if you have science and reasoning behind it. And, I mean, if one day of the year they're at 11 cars and the rest of it they're under 10, is the city likely to spend the time and effort trying to shut it down?
Well, by the time you got the
Common sense has to
complaint,
come.
they'd be back in compliance, but I do think, limiting it to 10, when 10 has been determined to be a number for a typical family, I think that's reasonable, right? You're trying to promote that residential feel.
Well, I know there's some days where I'm in and out 10 times, and I don't even have a family, and I don't run a business out of my house. So, I mean, there could be even just residents out of compliance and don't even do anything, so.
And it's the employees would be the one that owns property and one other? That's the limit?
You could conceivably
Working on
have,
site?
let's say there's a husband-wife situation, if they're both working for the home occupation, you could conceivably have 3 people working there.
Okay.
Because they both reside
Right,
there, plus
right.
the one who
Mhm.
does not reside there. And really a lot of this language exists in our current code, but our current code segregated it into a minor home occupation and a major home occupation. Our minor home occupation was more restrictive and was just a staff review, and our major home occupation was a conditional use, and was really triggered by that one employee. Otherwise, for the most part, they were almost exactly the same. But of the people who actually comply with the ordinance, the vast majority are just the people who are working on their own. It's very rare to get someone who is looking to have an actual employee outside of someone who's been doing it for a long time, like an accountant or something like that. So that's why I personally, from an enforcement standpoint, am okay with the home occupation language as it stands.
Did you want to have an official decision on that, or we just go with consensus?
Well, as far as an actual vote to change it per se, unless someone wants that from the plan commission here, I think we'll keep it as it is.
Okay.
Unless there's a petition right now. And really, as far as I'm concerned, I think that we did a good job right now of potentially vetting this. We talked about it, a resident brought forth their concern, and I think we potentially satisfied our duty as far as this is concerned, even though we're not making any modifications or keeping the status quo, so.
Okay, we'll check back on that issue after the public hearing.
Works.
Yeah.
And those dates are good for now. We'll check, have a legal check on what statute says as far as the resolution from the Plan Commission. And if we do set the Monday, the June 4th for Plan Commission to vote on the resolution, if for whatever reason you deny that resolution, then we'll cancel that public hearing. Okay.
And then just for this is a more selfish question, would you be drafting a resolution and the notices, or is that something that?
We can do that.
Okay. I'm sure I could, I don't know, fudge something, but if you've got some models
We
from
have a few,
previous,
just a couple.
I would appreciate you taking the time.
You guys got boilerplate template, so.
But you'll have to, you might have to modify it to the kind of standard resolution format that you have here.
Yeah, that's fine, as long as you give me the initial language, I
Got
can
it.
do the tweaking, and I'm sure our city attorney will have some comments as well.
Okay.
So then what would be the earliest date or the actual date that the notice has to be into the newspaper?
For the June 19th meeting,
And it's gotta be 30 days, so it'd have to be May, prior to May 19th.
and usually the Tribune is very good that you can get it in a day or two before.
As long as they know. Okay.
Since they do publish every day, it's usually not an issue.
Yeah.
So that gives us at least a week to figure it out.
That's all I really have for presentation.
But I would encourage you to review that comprehensive plan map. Just sit down if you want to sit down with me and I can kind of take you through some of the, compare what our current plan is versus what is proposed there. Same thing with the zoning map. If there are any areas you have, just circle them and give me a call, and I'm happy to sit down with any of you.
Just as a quick question, because I had visited a planning commission meeting probably about 6 months ago. There was one discussion about increasing the footage of the zoning request. Was it a conditional use permit or variance from 100 to 300? Was that incorporated in there?
I believe so. That was one of the tweaks from 3 or 4 months ago.
From the joint meeting.
Yeah.
That was discussed at the joint meeting.
Yeah, to move it from the 100 to 300. If that's not in this section, these are all the appendixes, which are really the development standards. There's another 100 pages of the actual boring stuff, and then the 300-foot amount is in that section.
You say boring, I say enjoyable.
You're in the minority, let's put it that way.
No, I think you're right.
Yeah, this should still be the
Yeah, so it's 17th and Rosecrans, the zoning map draft shows it as M1 General Industrial.
It's white.
Is it being white?
Yeah, I think it was because we have the zoning request. I let them know, so they were just going to leave it blank until we got it determined.
Got it.
So at what point now, as far as that, turning it down, can the county come back at any time that, if they have somebody else that wants to develop?
30 days or something, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, they can come back at the next meeting for a different one and everything else, so it isn't like...
They could go back at any time, right?
Right.
Anytime they can.
And it's not officially denied until the council acts on it.
Yeah.
So they could still overturn the commission.
But there is a limit, right? I mean, if they can't come back next month and make the same request.
I say that's conditional use that has that you can't, that I've seen that you can't come back every month asking for the same exact request unless there's substantial changes. But I think a rezoning you can.
Our ordinance in La Crosse County is, it can't come back for a year.
Okay.
But I don't know that from this ordinance.
I don't know that we have that particular language in this one. I can look it up for you.
But, it's substantial change is the important part of that conversation. What's a substantial change?
Right.
I'll ask Tim, he'll know off the top of his head if it's in there or not.
You're waiting on me to find it?
No. There were people that were opposed to this and 2 people that were in favor of it. If there was a request and you had 50 people that showed up in favor of it and you had the same number of people opposed to it, does a substantial change means that physically something different with the property has to
With
change?
the application. It's a
With the
substantial
application.
change to the application.
So instead of... Industrial.
Right.
Or you would limit the number of units, say from 40 down to 30.
Sure.
Would that be a substantial change?
Well,
then?
no, because I don't know that it would, because it's... Right.
The key.
And that would be my biggest concern in a situation like this, is that they're motivated to sell it, and they come back and say, well, we'd like to do it as...
But it's not likely that it is in your ordinance, so it's not a concern.
Right. Okay.
I don't believe it is.
I think I'd remember if it was, but I can't guarantee that.
So I guess in the essence of time, item number 9 is review the final working draft of the zoning ordinance with the consultant Civitech and setting the public hearing date. Do we have that? Are we satisfied with moving forward from item 9 to item 10?
What I've jotted down is the zoning public hearing will be set for Tuesday, June 19th, 2018 at 5:30 p.m. Common council action on the zoning ordinance will tentatively be scheduled for Tuesday, July 17th, 2018. Does that sound?
That's right.
Does everybody in agreement? Okay.
Yeah, because there's not a public hearing on the resolution to adopt the comprehensive plan, correct? That's just an action item. Okay, good. Then we're good.
Okay.
Okay, so with hearing that, then we will move to item 10, which is adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those against? Meeting is adjourned at 5:43 PM.